Good evening, one and all. Thank you for joining us in these difficult times of re-emerging COVID pandemic in the form of the Omicron variant. I am Dr. Mounam Chattopadhyay, postdoctoral trainee at Department of Endocrinology, NRS Medical College and Hospital, Kolkata. I welcome you all to another electronic endocrine enrichment by experts, the 4E series of webinars organized by the Endocrine Society of Bengal. The topic for today is diet, micronutrients, and thyroid health. It is an important and pertinent topic and also very helpful for us, especially the postdoctoral trainees, which is very rarely discussed in all the scientific forums and lectures. But it has important implications in comprehensive management of patients suffering from thyroidal illness. Today's session will be chaired by Professor Pradeep Raichaudhuri sir. Sir needs no introduction. He was the former professor and head of the Department of Endocrinology and Metabolism in Medical College and Hospital, Kolkata. He has numerous publications in various national and international journals to his credit. Thank you so much for joining us, sir, and agreeing to be the chairperson. The speaker for today is Dr. Amritava Ghosh, sir. He is an assistant professor and the faculty in charge at the Department of Endocrinology and Metabolism, All India Institute of Medical Sciences, Raipur. He has numerous awards and publications in various national and international journals to his credit. He is the reviewer for a number of international journals, author of MCQs in endocrinology for DM entrance examination. He is also the editor of famous textbooks and the RSSDI yearbooks. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us today. I would now request Professor Raichaudhuri sir to please take over and formally introduce the speaker and introduce the session. Over to you, sir.
Today's topic is diet, micronutrient, and thyroid. Micronutrients are essential in diet so that excess of heat and less of heat both causes ill health. And regarding diet, we have got many myths about the diet and thyroid. Today, Dr. Amritava Ghosh will be delivering us regarding this topic, which is very important to understand, or also in practicing the endocrinology. Without delaying, I request Dr. Amritava to come to the business. Dr. Amritava.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for the introduction. First of all, I thank Nilanjan sir and Endocrine Society of Bengal for giving me an opportunity to speak on this topic. I'm going to share my slides. Are the slides visible?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
You make a slideshow.
So,
Okay.
the topic is diet, micronutrients, and thyroid health. So, often a less discussed topic, and the agendas under which I'm going to discuss it are the introduction, and I'm going to focus on the two most important nutrients, that is iodine and selenium, in relation to the thyroid, and briefly finally touch upon the other micronutrients and other goitrogens and herbal preparations. So, trace elements which are very essential for production and metabolism of thyroid hormone. Primary among them include iodine and selenium. So iodine is required for synthesis of thyroid hormones, and it constitutes a major bulk of the thyroid hormones. about 65% of the molecular weight of T4 and 59% of the molecular weight of T3 is composed by the iodine. So it is a non-metallic trace element, and it is ingested either in inorganic form or in organic bound forms. So the inorganic iodide ion is the inorganic form, while iodine usually refers to iodide as well as the bound iodine forms. So intestinal absorption takes place in the form of inorganic iodide, and in the body, the thyroid contains the largest pool of iodine, mostly in the form of iodinated amino acids. The peripheral pool is very small, about 250 microgram, and it is turned over many times during the day. Iodine is nearly all extracellular, and in extracellular fluid, its concentration is 10 to 15 microgram per liter. Iodide is removed from extracellular fluid by the kidneys and the thyroid. Small quantities are lost through the skin, in expired air, in stool, and in milk in lactating women. So the thyroid clearance for iodine is 10 to 20 ml per plasma per minute. And it again ranges from 3 ml per minute after chronic iodine ingestion to 500 to 600 mg per day. That is
Hello, Mona. If you are there, please mute others. As a host, you can mute others because there are
I
some.
have muted, sir. I have muted everyone except the
Yeah. But you have not muted me, of course. Now you mute all others.
Okay. Sir, you can carry on, sir.
okay. Thank you. So I'll just briefly touch upon the thyroid hormone synthesis to highlight the areas where iodine and as well as the other micronutrients are involved in the synthesis of and metabolism of thyroid hormone. The thyroid traps iodine mainly by means of sodium iodide symproter, which is located at the basolateral membrane, and it is an active process by which iodide enters the cell, resulting in a concentration in the cell of 20 to 50 times higher than the plasma. And the iodide is further transported from cytoplasm to the follicular lumen in a passive manner mediated by apical iodide transporter. So once transported into the thyroid iodide, it is either oxidized and organified, or it diffuses back into the extracellular fluid. So some leak is there. So thyroglobulin and thyroperoxidase are two of the proteins which are synthesized and secreted by thyroid cells. The iodine binds to tyrosine residues in the thyroglobulin to form monoiodotyrosine or diiodotyrosine. One monoiodotyrosine combines with one diiodotyrosine to form T3, while two residues of diiodotyrosine combine to form T4. These are still bound to the thyroglobulin and maintained inside the lumen. And depending on the requirement in the body, these are further internalized within the cell, where it binds with the lysosome and the thyroglobulin is degraded, releasing the T3, T4 into the cytoplasm, which are further transported into the plasma. So deiodination of T4 to T3 or reverse T3 or T2 occurs by selenoproteins called deiodinase. TSH enhances the transport of iodide and its organification. There is also an internal autoregulatory system through which the iodide transport and its responsiveness to TSH vary inversely. That is, when there is sufficiency of iodine, and there is decreased transport of iodide. While when there is deficiency, the transport mechanism is more robust and it transports greater amount of iodide into the cells. So the quantity of iodine that undergoes organification displays a biphasic response to increasing doses of iodine. At first, there is increasing organification and then decreasing as a result of a relative blockade of organic binding. So this decreasing yield of organic iodine from increasing doses of iodide is named Wolff-Chaikoff effect. So iodide is also generated in the thyroid by the deiodination of iodotyrosin's liberated during the hydrolysis of thyroglobulin. So part of this iodide is again reorganified and the remainder is lost from the gland. So that is called iodide leak. So what are the dietary sources of iodide? So iodide occurs in nature as iodide and iodate, and its mineral form occurs in igneous rocks and salts. So again, it with erosion, it dissolves in the water, and with passing time, there is decreased iodide content in the salt, which is very commonly observed in the hilly regions, particularly the Himalayas in India and the Gangetic plains. So after dissolving, it is drained into the water bodies and subsequently it drains to the rivers and the seas. Some of it enters the air as it is it remains in the air and subsequently with rain it again comes down to the soil and is taken up in the land surface, and from the land surface a part of it is taken up into the plants. So these plants are again eaten by the animals. So the iodine content of the plant or the animals depends on the iodine content of the salt. So where the soil. So where the soil is poor in iodine, plants and animal tissues are low in iodine content, and humans are exposed to iodine deficiency if the diet is based only on the food produced in these areas. So vegetables do not provide adequate dietary iodine intake, and vegetarians and vegans are exposed to iodine deficiency even in iodine sufficient areas. So which are the rich sources of iodine in food? So these are mainly of animal origin like meat, milk, eggs and fish, particularly the seafood. The seaweeds or seafood or sea fish are rich in iodine because marine plants and animals can concentrate the iodine from seawater. So as fresh water contains less iodine than salt water, similarly the freshwater fish will have less iodine than the sea fish. So processed food may contain slightly higher levels of iodine due to addition of iodized salt or iodine containing food additives. Iodophores are used for sterilizing agent in milk industry in some countries, and this is another source of iodine in the food chain. Another source from which humans may get iodine are medications, particularly amiodarone, topical antiseptics like povidone iodine, diagnostic agents like radio contrast medium contains iodine, and multivitamin preparations. Internationally accepted norm, iodization of salt for human food consumption is the strategy which has been adopted to fight the iodine deficiency disorders. So what is the recommended intake of iodine? In adults, it is 150 microgram per day, slightly higher in pregnant and lactating women, that is 200 to 250 microgram, while it is lower in children, 70 to 120 microgram per day. In neonates, around 40 microgram per day. So because around 85 to 90% of the iodine is excreted in urine, so urinary iodine estimation is a good way of determining the iodine sufficiency. So the minimal urinary iodine concentration for reaching the definition of iodine sufficiency is 100 microgram per liter. Usually spot urine measurement is sufficient rather than the more cumbersome 24-hour urinary measurement or even the urinary iodine to creatinine ratio. So iodine deficiency disorders are a spectrum of disorders which affect people variously depending on the age of onset of the iodine deficiency. The most common presentation is particularly seen in adults or in adolescent or children are presence of goiter. It occurs because of increased TSH stimulation. It may be the only manifestation. This excessive TSH stimulation may be sufficient to cause a sufficient amount of thyroxine production, resulting in the euthyroid state and then euthyroid goiter. However, if there is significant iodine deficiency, the patient may land up in hypothyroidism. So again, hypothyroidism may be easily treatable with iodine replacement. The reversibility, of course, depends on the age of onset of hypothyroidism. So I'll just come back to creatinism. Before that, just a brief discussion on the iodine deficiency disorders. Over 20 years, from 1993 to 2013, the prevalence of iodine deficiency has significantly decreased. However, 1/3 of the world still continues to have 1/3 of the world's population still continues to battle iodine deficiency disorders. So, endemic goiter refers to the condition where more than 5% of the school-age children, 6 to 12 years, have enlarged thyroid glands, which is assessed by clinical examination. Large colloid goiters often represent a maladaptation instead of adaptation to iodine deficiency because the thyroglobulin is poorly iodinated and its hydrolysis leads to enhanced urinary loss of iodine, further aggravating the iodine deficiency. So iodine deficiency during pregnancy has been associated with increased incidence of miscarriage, stillbirth, and birth defects and may result in congenital hypothyroidism in the offspring. Similarly, iodine deficient women who are breastfeeding may provide insufficient iodine to their infants. So congenital hypothyroidism or cretinism occurs in two forms. One is neurological form. It is characterized by mental and sometimes physical retardation and various neurological deficits, including deaf mutism. Patients do not exhibit signs of hypothyroidism and have goiters, which is in proportion to that in the rest of the population. While the myxedematous or hypothyroid form is characterized by dwarfism marked with delayed bone and sexual maturation, mental retardation, and signs of severe hypothyroidism. So unlike the normal population of the same area, the patients present no goiter. On the contrary, the thyroid is atrophic. Neurological cretinism is due to thyroid hormone deficiency in early fetal development due to maternal iodine deficiency that affects the fetus before its own thyroid is functional. While myxedematous cretinism is associated with thyroid deficiency, iodine deficiency leading to thyroid insufficiency during late pregnancy and early infancy. So infant mortality is increased in areas of iodine deficiency. And because thyroid hormone is essential for normal brain development, in areas of iodine deficiency, there has been observed to the children to have lower IQs, poorer school performance, and learning disabilities. So even there is increased susceptibility to radiation-induced thyroid cancer among iodine-deficient individuals, particularly exposure to iodine-131. So the tolerable upper intake level in iodine is difficult to determine. However, it is still considered at around 2 to 4 times the higher, 2 to 4 times the recommended level. So again, in children, it depends on the age. 200 microgram from 1 to 3 years, 250 from 4 to 6 years, 300 from 7 to 10 years, 450 from 11 to 14 years, and 15 to 17 years, 500 micrograms per day in adults, including those who are pregnant and lactating. The upper limit is considered as 600 microgram per day. So iodine excess is usually rare, and even when it is present, it rarely manifests as any apparent clinical problems. This excess is particularly commonly observed in northern coastal regions of Japan and China, where the consumption of seaweed is remarkably high. So an increased incidence of autoimmune thyroid disease frequently parallels an increased dietary iodine intake. In iodine sufficient populations, excess iodine intake most commonly associated with an elevated blood levels of TSH, hypothyroidism, and goiter. And prolonged intakes of levels more than 18 mg per day, as is observed in northern Japan or China, it can be associated with increased incidence of goiter and TSH stimulation. In iodine deficiency, there is increased risk of development of autonomous thyroid nodules, which are unresponsive to normal thyroid regulation system. So in this population, if there is iodine supplementation, even at usual doses of 150 to 200 micrograms per day, they may develop an increased incidence of iodine-induced hyperthyroidism, particularly in the presence of multinodular goiter. In countries which were previously iodine deficient, like Argentina or Austria, salt iodization programs have been shown to be associated with increased incidence of thyroid papillary cancers, while there has been a relative decrease in thyroid follicular cancers. Epidemiological studies show a correlation between dietary iodine intake and the presence of occult papillary cancer in autopsy series. Acute iodine poisoning, though rare, may be associated with burning sensation in mouth, throat, stomach, fever, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, and can also lead to coma. acute and massive excess iodine can inhibit the process of synthesis of hormones by the thyroid gland through an inhibition of the process of iodine organification, as we discussed before, the Wolff-Chaikoff effect. Next, we move on to selenium. It is a trace element that plays an essential role in regulation of thyroid function. And it is ingested and absorbed as selenite, selenate, or selenomethionine. The human thyroid contains the highest selenium concentration per weight compared to all the tissues. So most selenium is incorporated into proteins of thyrocytes, particularly the as selenocysteine. So it is an amino acid found in the catalytic center of many enzymes involved in cell defense against free radicals, as we will discuss further. So the first among the series of enzymes is the glutathione peroxidases. So 3 types of selenium containing glutathione peroxidases have been found in thyroid tissue: the cellular glutathione peroxidase, the plasma glutathione peroxidase, and phospholipid hydroperoxide glutathione peroxidase. So this enzyme acts as antioxidants and reduces the potentially damaging reactive oxygen species. So we know hydrogen peroxide is generated within the thyroid gland, and assists in the function of thyroperoxidase. And however, it is usually thyroid gland is usually protected from this because hydrogen peroxide is limited to the lumen of the thyroid follicles. In addition, the glutathione peroxidase acts as antioxidant enzymes, and through their reduction with the via oxidation of glutathione, this again acts as a protection for the thyroid tissues. The another enzyme which contains selenium is the thioredoxin reductase. It maintains thioredoxin in a reduced form and participates in the regeneration of several antioxidant systems such as vitamin C. And another group of enzymes which we are aware is the iodotyrosine deiodinases. So these are again selenoenzymes and catalyze the reductive cleavage of aromatic carbon and iodine bonds. So what are the dietary sources? Again, like iodine, the animal sources are the primary sources of selenium. These are found particularly in the organ meats and followed by the muscle meat and also in the seafood. Vegetable content of selenium depends on soil selenium content. And supplements are also available both in organic and inorganic forms. For the recommended intake of selenium in adults is 55 microgram per day, slightly higher in pregnant and lactating women, that is 60 and 70 microgram per day. While in infants, it is 20 to 40 microgram per day. So usually selenium deficiency does not lead to any evident clinical manifestation. However, selenium deficient individuals appear more susceptible to physiological stresses. As like selenium deficiency could enhance the virulence and progression of certain viral infections like Cushing's disease, AIDS. The selenium deprived cells are devoid of antioxidative defense capacity because of the enzymes we discussed before. And this decreased activity of glutathione peroxidase might lead to aberrant intracellular iodination of proteins, leading to deleterious events such as apoptosis or exposure of unusual epitopes, leading to an autoimmune trigger of the autoimmune mechanisms. So exposure of unusual epitopes can lead to recognition by immune system or aberrant targeting, leading to activation of autoimmune mechanisms. So there has been observations that this selenium supplementation may have beneficial effects in autoimmune thyroid disorders, particularly the Hashimoto's thyroiditis. Selenium deficiency increases the sensitivity of thyroid gland to necrosis, causing iodide overload, caused by iodide overload. So there is increased necrosis, increased fibrosis caused by mechanism mediated by transforming growth factor. Fibroblast proliferation is there. Also, low selenium levels have correlated to the incidence of thyroid cancer. An European cross-sectional study found an inverse association between selenium and thyroid volume and protective effect of selenium against goiter. Several randomized controlled trials have been done evaluating the efficacy of selenium in autoimmune thyroid diseases, particularly Hashimoto's thyroiditis, hypothyroidism, and Graves' orbitopathy. In a large multi-center RCT with selenium, patients with mild Graves' orbitopathy significantly improved upon treatment with 100 microgram per day, twice daily of selenium, given for 6 months duration. Similarly, RCTs have been done in patients with Hashimoto's thyroiditis. So recently, a meta-analysis of 16 such trials found that selenium supplementation reduced serum thyroperoxidase antibody levels after 3, 6, and 12 months in a population with chronic autoimmune thyroiditis treated with thyroxine. However, in untreated autoimmune thyroiditis population, the effect was significant only after 3 months. However, these studies were not highly powered and had inherent drawbacks which significantly impair our ability to draw conclusions from this meta-analysis about beneficial role of selenium in autoimmune thyroid disorders. As of now, there is no recommendation to routinely administer selenium among patients with autoimmune thyroid disorders. Coming to other micronutrients, the data is very limited. I'll just briefly touch upon certain micronutrients which can be discussed. These are copper, zinc, iron, which are critical components of antioxidant enzymes and can have roles in protection of thyroid from damage caused by hydrogen peroxide or other reactive oxygen species. Iodine deficiency also leads to decreased glutathione peroxidase activity in several found in rat tissues, and T4 and T3 disposal rates were also decreased. Impaired efficiency of thyroid hormone synthesis in iodine deficient goitrous children has been observed. Thyroperoxidase is a heme protein, and adults have been reported indicating that sufficient iodine supply is required for effective thyroid hormone synthesis after iodine supplementation. Calcium could be goitrogenic when in excess in the diet. Administration of 2 grams or more of calcium per day was found to be associated with decreased iodide clearance by the thyroid. Furthermore, when given together with thyroxine replacement, it impairs the absorption of thyroxine. Bromine is concentrated by the thyroid and interferes with thyroidal iodine uptake, and it possibly competitively inhibits iodide transport into the gland. It can also induce alterations in cellular architecture, blood supply, and it can lead to a reduction in T4 and T3 levels. Although fluorine is not concentrated in the thyroid, it has mild antithyroid effect, possibly by inhibiting the thyroid transport process, iodide transport process. So again, it is goitrogenic, and dietary fluorine may exacerbate iodine deficiency. Cobalt inhibits iodide binding by the thyroid with an unknown mechanism. Cobalt excess may produce goiter and decrease thyroid hormone production. Cobalt deficiency is associated with reduction in deiodinase type 1 activity and fall in T3 levels. Zinc, rubidium, cadmium, and mercury might interact with or impair the functioning of selenium in thyroid physiology. Certain vitamins can also influence thyroid function, particularly vitamin A deficiency has been found to increase TSH. Now, moving on to certain common dietary products we consume, and this is particularly a common question among patients who come to us for treatment of hypothyroidism regarding particular food items which they may avoid. So cyanogenic plant foods like cauliflower, broccoli, cabbage, Brussels sprouts, mustard seeds, turnip, radish, bamboo shoot, cassava, they exert antithyroid activity via inhibition of thyroid peroxidase. The hydrolysis of some glucose inolates found in cruciferous vegetables, that is, may yield a compound known as goitrine, which has been found to interfere with thyroid hormone synthesis. Also, hydrolysis of another class of these compounds known as indole glucosinolates results in release of thiocyanate ions, which can compete with iodine for uptake by the thyroid gland. So here it competes with the sodium iodide importer for iodine uptake. So increased exposure to thiocyanate ions from these vegetable consumption, however, does not appear to increase risk of hypothyroidism unless it is accompanied by iodine deficiency. Smoking. Thiocyanates deriving from tobacco smoking may be associated with an increased risk of goiter in iodine deficient areas. Another dietary component commonly consumed is soybean. Again, soybean has goitrogenic properties when iodine intake is limited. The soybean contains isoflavones, which inhibit activity of thyroid peroxidase, lowering thyroid hormone synthesis. Furthermore, soybean interrupts the intrahepatic cycle of thyroid hormone. So soy protein, when administered, particularly with infants with congenital hypothyroidism who are on products containing soy, or in adults taking soy protein products who are on levothyroxine therapy for hypothyroidism, this soy protein administration has been shown to increase the requirement of levothyroxine required to achieve an euthyroid state. However, high intakes of soy isoflavones alone does not appear to increase the risk of hypothyroidism when iodine consumption is adequate. Herbal preparations. Several herbal preparations may affect thyroid functions, like ashwagandha herbal extract can induce thyrotoxicosis. Olive leaf extract can either stimulate the thyroid or increase peripheral conversion from T4 to T3. Other botanicals that may alter thyroid function are garlic, pineapple, oats, ginger, capsaicin, ginkgo biloba, Lycodis, Asian ginseng. So again, data regarding these products is very much limited. So take home message, iodine is a major component of thyroid hormones. Iodine deficiency disorders continue to be a significant cause of morbidity in many parts of the world. Selenium participates in the antioxidant network and can modulate the course of autoimmune thyroid disorders. Common food items like cyanogenic plant foods and soybean have goitrogenic property, but are not known to significantly affect thyroid function in the presence of iodine sufficiency. Thank you.
Hello. Well done, Amritaba. You have gone extensively through all aspects of different micronutrient deficiency and excess. Deficiency is called the hidden hunger. Is a term which you use about the micronutrient deficiency. You have gone all throughout. Regarding control programs, I think time doesn't permit it. I think control program is these are very important. It will be another day. Now I ask all participants to ask Dr. Amritaba if they have anything, any doubt or anything to clear.
Yeah. Thanks, Pradipda. Thanks, Amritaba, for your wonderful talk. I have a question. Means, how do you link iodine deficiency, and universal iodization with follicular cell-derived thyroid cancer? Is there any link, and if so, what's the link?
You are asking regarding link between iodine deficiency and thyroid cancer.
Both iodine deficiency, sufficiency, and the relationship with follicular cell-derived thyroid cancer, because this is a little bit a controversial area.
Yes, sir. One thing is that in deficiency of iodine exposes the thyroid to increase sensitivity to radiation-induced damage, which can predispose to thyroid cancer. Another issue is particularly which has been observed in observational studies is in iodine deficient population who have been treated with iodine, and iodine deficiency has been corrected, have shown an increased incidence of papillary carcinoma, while the proportion of follicular carcinoma has decreased. The mechanism is still an area of controversy.
Yeah, I think that's a very intriguing finding, that if the patients are having iodine deficiency, they have a greater chance of developing follicular carcinoma. And if we try to optimize iodine by various iodization programs in that community, in that population, there is a slight increase tendency towards increase in papillary thyroid carcinoma. Now, this is just a comment. I think nobody knows why this happens. There are many theories, but one hypothesis is that in populations where active iodization and active surveillance are there the increased prevalence of papillary thyroid carcinoma has indeed been suggested due to a result of increased prevalence than per se because of increased iodization. Of course, this is one hypothesis. There may be certain counter hypotheses to this line of thought, but this was something interesting to note. And what I find that even if you have a papillary thyroid carcinoma, because this will actually try to whether we should go for then universal iodization, because if that increases and the risk of thyroid cancer. But I think still we should go for iodization programs, because a papillary thyroid carcinoma diagnosed early can be very well treated and may not even, as you know, may not even require that extensive surgery at times.
Again, in a case of combined selenium and iodine deficiency, which should be corrected first? It is a stock question in examination.
Yes, and there is definitely that issue of if selenium deficiency is corrected first, it can aggravate the hypothyroidism.
Right. Anybody? Any questions? Almost all of the micronutrient has been addressed. Naturally, no question is left, I suppose.
Yes, sir, there are no questions in the chat box also.
So if there is no question, I can declare this session closed.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks
you,
to
sir.
Dr. Ghosh sir for the wonderful deliberation. Thanks to Professor Raichaudhuri sir for sharing his valuable inputs in the topic. And thanks to Endocrine Society of Bengal for organizing this wonderful webinar. Thanks to the audience for their participation in their busy schedule. Hopefully we'll meet again shortly in another interesting webinar, which is to be announced shortly. Good night, everyone, and stay safe.
Good night. Thank you.